Hello and welcome to Grey Eye and Disability Arts Online's podcast, Disability And, bringing together thoughtful discussion and debate. This month, Sandra Allen talks with Shafiq Ghafoor, Matty Kennedy and Kate Lauder about disability, the working class and LGBTQIA+.
Welcome to Disability And ... I'm Sandra Allen, guest editor at Disability Arts Online from 30th of March to 26th of April. I'm here today in a gloriously sunny Glasgow. I just asked everybody about the weather before we started because when I wrote this I thought you never know, I can always hope. And this morning there was some sun, but anyway, we are not in a gloriously sunny Glasgow, but I'm with gloriously sunny people. So I'm here with Shafiq Ghafoor, Matty Kennedy, and Kate Lauder. We're in the lovely accessible buildings with genderless toilets at Rock Villa National Theatre of Scotland, next to the Glasgow Canal. And we're going to have a wee chat about things relevant to disability and ... working class LGBTQIA+. So that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer or questioning, intersex, asexual, and related identities. And I also have to add, in brackets, in Scotland, because everyone here is from Scotland. So we'll chat about what it's like for some disabled artists in Scotland who are also queer and or trans, and also from working class, working poor, or skint experiences, backgrounds, and cultures. So I'm thrilled to bring you these three artists. First of all, we have Shafiq Ghafoor, and the bio says, Shafiq Ghafoor does not do binaries. When asked about their race, sexuality, gender, or class, they tend to respond with, in quotes, a bit of both. They are fascinated by music, dance, and physical activity. They dance with a couple of community groups and exercise with Trans for Motion, an exercise group for trans and non-binary people. Kate Lauder has had an on-off career in theatre, film, and TV for over 27 years. She has qualifications in script writing for film and television, television production, and technical theatre. Kate is transgender, working class, and bisexual, and has a stammer and depression. After recent sacrifices and changes, she hopes to reignite her passion for community arts work. Matty Kennedy is an artist, filmmaker, and writer. Living and working in Glasgow, they have so far made 4 short films, their most recent one being Enid and Valerie. Their films range from animation to LGBTQIA+, to learning disability subjects. Hi everyone, and welcome.
Hi.
So I want to talk with you a bit today about why you make art, what kinds of arts projects and communities you're into and want to have more of in the world, and what future we can dream together. So I'm going to start with a question for Shafiq. I've known you to be a singer of traditional Scottish songs, a samba dancer, and also into fibre arts. What draws you to art right now, and particularly community arts?
Well, I've always been into arts and music. It's less of a thing that I do as activity or actions, and more something that I realised is very important to maintaining a good quality of life. It's being a dancer and dancing, singing, performing in front of groups of people gives me more energy than I put into it. Mm-hmm. I really, really love doing things where you wind up, you get something back from at the end, you get something from an audience, you get something from a random person walking down the street because I'm practicing my dance moves at the bus stop. You wind up with a knitted garment or a skein of yarn at the end. It's doing something where you get something back at the end.
That's beautiful. That's cool. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got into samba?
started with when I was doing activities with a group in Edinburgh called the Beltane Fire Festival, which is a seasonal festival. And I realised after taking part in it several times that doing a seasonal event when you have seasonal depression was really exacerbating my mental health. So I wanted to do something where I got to do performance that was all year round. So I did a taster with the Samba School, started as a drummer. And then I did a taster with a dance teacher that we had come to one of our weekends away. And I realised then that I had to do this. It just, made something changed in my soul. And interesting, this was about 4 or 5 years before I transitioned. And starting to dance and do that made me realise that how much discomfort I had in my body, which itself led to a couple of instances of dysphoria, which led me to realise that I needed to transition. Which, I know people who do things the other way around. They get into doing some kind of artistic or performance thing after transitioning, being that sort of change in the person and changing what kind of things you want to do. Whereas me being me, I do things backwards. But doing samba has been really, really fascinating, not just for me as a person who enjoys dancing and having the opportunity to flirt with random people, which I absolutely do, but also samba coming from Brazil. And of course, we're a diverse group in Scotland. We have some contact and connection with groups in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, in Recife. But getting the chance to learn the history and hearing that the different ways in which colonialism, imperialism, and race have affected in a different country, in a different space, was really important for me coming to terms with myself as a person of colour, living in Scotland, where there are many people of colour, but not always also queer and disabled and also Muslim. So come to terms with identities that are expected to be so disparate and disconnected. So samba has changed my life, seriously.
That's brilliant, thank you. Kate, you're passionate about theatre and film, and like Shafiq, you're into community-focused arts. Can you tell us about some of your community work and your dreams? I mean, you were telling me a bit about work you did with LGBT health. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about.
Well, I started doing the voluntary with LGBT health after a period of being a carer for my mum as she was passing away, and also so could get my confidence back as I was starting my transition, really, because I'd worked in theatre and film and whatever else pretty much all my life, really. But it was always on and off, and it is still kind of the same now. And I just found the working on those events and it just made me feel like myself again after a period of not being me and having to sacrifice everything for the folk and just start to take my life back again. For me, And just also in doing that, I was still helping the folk, which is a big part of me as well. But I found also with caring that it takes a big toll on you, and I'm still struggling to get my head around all that, and
it's a lot.
yeah.
It's a lot. When we chatted last week, after that terrible film we will not mention,
No.
you talked about having some dreams of doing like community arts and that sort of thing in your future. And is that something that is sort of taking form for you, or is it something that's sort of like
It's
still
still
kind of
very much a dream.
ambiguous? Yeah.
It's still very much a dream. I started off doing a work experience when I was 15 on a production, and I just fell in love with the whole thing then. And the moment I remember most of it, it was the first day of it, and I was very stressed out that day. But the highlight was that day was when I was holding up this flat. It's a carpenter attached it to the floor to play his drum, and so and I was like, yeah, this actually isn't that glamorous. It's just folk doing a job. It's just it's folk telling dirty jokes. It's folk just trying to do their thing in a creative way.
And you were saying to me that like you would like to start, some sort of company where you could offer help to people starting out and things like that.
That's because I worked a lot with film video and also started out working in films with the video in Edinburgh, and also before that I worked on community theatre events and stuff. So it was a very easy transfer of skills and just teach it like a duck day water, really.
That's brilliant. I think you'd be a great mentor. I think maybe a bit later we can talk about, we can come back to maybe this idea of like what our dream of like a project in Scotland might be like for working class queer and trans communities, like and skint people. Like what kind of space we'd like to see, and maybe dream big as well. Because I think we talked about that too. We can kind of limit ourselves because we can feel kind of like disheartened.
To put it in context, was this community based from production company that was based in West Pilton, a rough council estate in the north of Edinburgh, and they made documentaries, short films, the occasional feature film. They worked on and filmed various events and stuff, and just all kinds of things. And I just loved that vibe there because it taught me a lot of things technically and also personally as well. but it made me planted these seeds because when I started out there, I had big dreams of obviously going to Hollywood, being a big writer director, but the light got in the way, and then I started thinking, well, even if I was that successful, I would make sure I made enough cash and then just to disappear back home and make things. I'm really interested in doing and seeing, and that also involved helping other folk put their things in front of public. So that's their dream, to set up a small theatre and film production company, which would be, I would actually have, I guess, kind of a facilitator, kind of would actually let folk do their own thing, whether it's a film, a documentary, a stage play, a radio play, whatever they want, and just let them just have their say.
That's brilliant. I hope it happens. Let's keep scheming. Maddie, oh gosh, I think I last saw you in October. Is that true? That's terrible. When your short film Enid and Valerie was showing at the Fab Oscar Bright Learning Disabled Film Festival in Brighton as part of Matthew Hellett's Queer Freedom Programme. For our listeners and readers, Maddie made Enid and Valerie with animator Victoria Bastos, and it's this wonderful short film about a femme witch's tea party / incantation. That's an okay description. You can check it out online. And Maddie, I thought maybe you could talk a wee bit about queer freedom and what it means to you to have a queer learning disabled film community.
Alright, I'm just going to get stuck right in.
Alright, get stuck in.
Right.
Oh, they're rolling up the sleeves.
Right. Well, I have to kind of go back a little bit to 2015, and also just a little sort of introduction to listeners to Oscar Bright. Oscar Bright is a film festival that started up in 2004, and it was started up by learning disabled filmmakers who were frustrated at the climate of the fact that there weren't enough, not enough spaces or not enough representation for learning disabled filmmakers. So yeah, in 2004 they decided, right, let's start up our own little film festival, and they did, and it started off as a one-day film festival, and they screened films by learning disabled filmmakers. And it also featured, a lot of the films also featured learning disabled sort of subjects. And yeah, it's kind of grown from that really. And I think it's just bloody brilliant that they've been able to keep that going for such a long time. It's also a biannual festival. It's not on every year, it's once every 2 years. And the sort of actual festival committee is also made up of people with learning disabilities. And it's not just featuring people. It was made by people with learning disabilities for people with learning disabilities, which I think's got such a unique take to it. Yeah, in 2015 I first went. It was my first visit down to Oscar Bright, and I think I got funding from Creative Scotland. Don't get me wrong, like I was really nervous because it was like my first time getting funding. So I was just like, I was like so nervous. But they managed to give me a God knows how they managed to, but they did. Because I know that they can be really, like, the sort of arts funding system can be really, really, like, they don't give out money unless they really, really need to. But I suppose that's just the way the system is. But yeah, 2015, and it was just, honestly, that visit was it was such a breathtaking experience. Sorry for being so cheesy about it, but it really was. But yeah, it's just just like a whole bunch of just learning disabled sort of filmmakers and creatives just in this one space, watching like learning disability sort of filmmaking, and I was just like, wow, like this is bloody brilliant. My film, I think it was my second film, Just Me, that got screened there, and it was seeing it on that screen in front of like, you know, a community that I'm a part of was just a really, really great feeling. Also Sarah Gordy, who's an amazing artist, she did the keynote speech at that edition of the festival, and she was great as well. And it's actually where I met Matthew Hellett, where, I mean, that's kind of where the basis of our sort of working relationship kind of took off. And we hung out one night with the film committee, and we kind of talked over like sort of Chinese food, and we just talked about our identities as LGBTQ plus learning disabled filmmakers, because he's a filmmaker too. He made a really great film called Mrs. Sparkle, and it's just about his sort of drag alter ego, Mrs. Sparkle, and how his drag alter ego brings him a sort of happiness, and how it kind of brings him into the world as a sort of film. It's such a good film. It's such a good film, and yeah, I mean that kind of meeting also that sprang forth sort of a side project of events called the Matthew and Matthew events, which took place in Brighton, and the second one took place in my hometown of Glasgow, and that was the Glasgow Short Film Festival that took place in. Really, really good crowd. Like a lot of my friends actually came down to support me during that event. So I was like, I didn't even send out invitations. What's going on here? Like literally. But yeah, that was brilliant. And also Brighton is where Matthew lives. So it was kind of like one event in his hometown, one event in my hometown, which was really, really great. And yeah, obviously the Queer Freedom Strand, which you brought up, that started in 2017 at the, not the last one, because that was the last festival was just there, but the festival before. Matthew just had the idea for it. He was just like, right, we need an LGBTQ plus strand for not just learning disabled film, but not just for LGBTQ plus learning disabled filmmakers, but for LGBTQ plus learning disabled film as well. So they weren't just including filmmakers, they were also including just the films itself, like the representation within the films, which was really, really good. And yeah, like Matthew's like a total cultural advocate in terms of that. Like he was really pushing for it, and he obviously got it, and he was just really, really, like I could just tell how proud he was. Also, I got to do the keynote speech for that year to open up the inaugural strand, which I was bricking myself about. I spent like a fortnight doing the keynote speech, like 2 weeks just every day writing down, because I mean I had sleepless nights doing it, because I was just like, cause I'm like, it has to be a good keynote speech, because it's a keynote speech, you can't be like a sloppy speech. Yeah, I know. But no, but literally I got like a standing ovation from people after the speech, so I was just like, oh my god, like it was just such a, like that edition of the festival was just such a groundbreaking sort of event. Like it was kind of like the first time. Well, I'm not a fan of saying first, but it was kind of like maybe not the first time, but it just felt like a sort of time where it was a vital time where LGBTQ plus learning disabled filmmakers and just LGBT learning disabled sort of films were being at the forefront of a festival that is so accommodating and so inclusive, because it's not every day you get to hear or see LGBTQ plus learning disability representation being shown within a film festival.
Yeah, it's really rare.
It's really, really rare, and it was just, I remember actually going back to the first festival. It was like, I remember going back home And I got really, really emotional going back on the coach, going back home, and I was just like, oh, I really, really needed this. I needed to be here. It was just so vital. And I remember Lizzie, on the last night of my first visit to the festival, she kind of looked at me and she's like, we're a community now. You're part of a community now. It's important that your voice is heard. And that kind of, I went back to my hotel that night and I just started crying. I was like, oh, it's so lovely, shout out to Lizzie and David and Matthew and the rest of the Oscar Bright gang. Big shout out to them.
Hi,
But I think the work that they've done and the work that Matthew's done as a sort of cultural advocate is really, really, really great, and they deserve all the praise. And it's not even that, it's not just LGBTQ plus learning and disability representation they're working on. They're also working on representation for BAME learning disabled films and filmmakers, and they're also working on representation for female learning disabled filmmakers and sort of films. So that kind of just shows the sort of willingness to grow and to learn, and to really no, we don't want it just to be learning disabled, we want it to be kind of inclusive of all the...
And doing that, actively working on bringing in groups who would even be marginalised within that community. And not waiting until people are going, there are all these amazing films that no one is looking at. And that's something which I think is incredible in these types of spaces where, you've got a group who are a minority within a minority, who are often forgotten or left out or left to be an afterthought. We've got a little bit of learning disability support here. And when you take that and or when a group takes that space and makes it their own and makes something wonderful out of it, is really, really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. Definitely.
I went for the first time this year to see Queer Freedom, saw you there, and it was one of the most brilliant places I've been. Just the whole vibe of the place from the moment you came in the door, or even before I came in the door, they made sure everything was going to be just how it needed to be, and people, felt comfortable, and seeing that power of people being in charge of their own space and not just being because we've met each other at other events that I will not name, but we're included as disabled people or learning disabled people as a tick box strand, as an afterthought, and it doesn't feel anything the same. It's just sort of to say, oh, we did disability, and this is the exact opposite of that. It was brilliant.
I think also the genuine fact that for me, I think it was in 2015 that I was actually researching learning disabled films or learning disabled filmmakers, and it was honestly the difficulty, even typing into Google queer learning disabled filmmakers, that's good luck Google, or even just queer learning disabled films. It's good luck Google. I hope you find some treasures in there. But I actually found one film though, and it was I think it was actually screened at one of the Queer Freedom. I think it was screened at the very first one, John and Michael.
I programmed that film at Who's Your Dandy, but it was years ago.
Oh, really?
I'm terrible with names.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it was after Queer Freedom.
Really?
Made film, right?
It's animated. Yeah, you saw it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah, Shira Abney, that's her name.
Yeah.
I think.
And obviously Matthew's films. I saw them.
Mrs. Sparkle.
So I kind of felt some sort of isolation while trying to research.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm just where the hell is all this stuff?
I have this found poem from 2006 that is, did you mean to search for queer plus Edinburgh plus trains? When I moved to Edinburgh, that's what I got when I searched, so I feel I wasn't even adding in disabled or learning disabled.
No, but do you know what I mean? It's the sort of the algorithms or something like that.
Yeah, and I think also in Scotland too, there's at that time, but so things have moved in a positive direction, I think, in some ways. I mean, it's not always that things get better narrative, but that's definitely a case of yes with Oscar Bright. Kate, we had a great chat the other day about some of us not feeling like we're artists if we're not producing things. And I think Maddie and I, we've talked about that a bit too. Like these feelings of unworthiness or not having something important to say, I think they can be really hard for artists when you have to work other jobs, and people who are disabled or ill in ways that affect energy, pacing, and pain. That can be especially hard. And I've been trying to personally reject the pressure to make finished products all the time, to think that like art only matters most when it's something tangible that we have to promote or sell. Like I've made a book, or I've done this film, or when a so-called important person or festival approves our work in a sort of official way, like a screening or publication. So I wanted to ask you, Kate, about your thoughts on that and what you feel. And it's a big question, but like, what is the purpose of art? And I mean, you can start with like, what's the purpose of art for you? It doesn't have to be answering it. What is the purpose? But why do we make art? You know,
the purpose of art for me, sorry, from the throat there, is that. It's not actually about the art, it's about the expression. It's about someone having their say, whatever the topic is, whatever they need to say. And the art part only comes into it if you do it in a so-called artistic way. But I think essentially we all need to have our feelings and thoughts about things in some way, shape or form, whether it's dance or film or books or whatever. But also, if you think about it, the drama classes at school, they're actually most about getting the people to actually stand up in front of others, in front of a crowd and speak. And obviously in the theatre, which speaks some lines of dialogue. But if someone's got to say a job interview, or they've got to make some kind of speech, if they're at a rally or at work, that training is really important. And there's also with my education and writing struck me in narrative generally, I suppose, that the human mind is adapted to learning things, listening to other opinions or whatever, if things are tackled in a way that's got some kind of structure to it, a beginning, a middle, and an end, essentially. And you've got to say, I'm currently learning French, and the starting point is it's just the basic words. Then you get on to slightly longer words and more complicated words, but still all mess at first, and you've got to find some kind of narrative in your head that makes sense of that, so you can do it, and also express it to others as well.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's like about finding the narrative.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Hey, you had said about like the idea of art existing, or ideally art existing to give people a voice as well. Did you want to talk about that at all? Or
Well,
Actually, what you were saying about people creating art and producing things, putting their own voices out there. From my sort of thought process, that is putting your ideas, your thoughts out into the world is part of the human experience. It's part of being a social animal, and that comes back to my idea of getting that sort of give and take, that you send something out into the world and you get something back. May not be what you expected, but that's part of how communities come together and build one another around people putting something of themselves into a work of art, a film, a piece of music, a dance choreography. And that is what brings people together. And there's always that, when you put something out there, when you step out in front of an audience, there's that intense vulnerability as well. And that's a very human thing. It's a thing that you don't really see in other animals. I mean, human beings are a type of animal, but that sort of vulnerability, that creation, that performance is something that you don't see in, to the same extent in certainly other primates.
It's interesting things when you watch, say, big politicians or powerful folk, the start of their speeches or whatever, doesn't matter how experienced they are. You can always tell a slight wee moment of hesitation right at the start of what they say, because that's just human nature. And they just try to sustain their audience, which currently with politics these days is a really scary right wing. I don't even want to think about it or talk about it. But anyway, essentially, that's thing up nicely.
We can all have a collective silent scream.
But that kind of hesitation, that sort of attempt to, when one is starting to sort of communicate, is that something that you think, is there a difference in how that happens when you're working in, for example, film as opposed to live? That's not something that I have experience of, so I'm asking.
Not really, no, because filming is usually up to takes. So it's essentially the same thing. They are performing live, but in a more kind of fragmented way. You just put together later on. Kind of like my speech in my stammer, but anyway.
Why not?
I'm going to move on to a question for Matty. I think feeling like a quote-unquote real or successful artist can also be tough for people who don't have access to mainstream arts networks. It's framed as something you'll achieve if you're good enough and work hard enough, but sometimes that's just bullshit, right? Like it's not that easy. Not that hard work is easy, but so for you, Maddie, how does being a working class and learning disabled femme affect access to mainstream arts, or even at times to disability or queer arts?
Right. Okay. I've got a lot written down here, so I'm just going to take it and just get stuck in. Right. I'm going to go back to education. So this is like way over a decade ago. I went to special needs schools all my life, like primary school, secondary school, but this is talking about secondary. I think it was my second work experience that I was doing. I was in 4th year, I think. And basically I was given, the list of what I wanted to do, what placements there were, and it was just all like sort of like construction, catering, working with old folks, which I actually did my first work experience, and I actually did enjoy it. Childcare, I think mechanics and all that stuff, and I'm like, where's all the art stuff? Where's all the media sort of work placements? So I was just there, and then I was like, no, nothing here that I want to do. So they were like, oh, but you need to pick something. And I'm like, well, what about working in a radio station? Because there's a community radio station that's not that far away from me. So I was like, well, what about that community radio station? And the reply was, you can't do that. And I was like, what? And there's like, and their reasoning for that was health and safety regulations.
What?
So yeah, I was a bit like, okay. I didn't delve further into it. I thought I'll leave it, but I'm going to be reporting it to the mother, of course. So yeah, I went back home, and I'm like, because like usually when I come back home from school, my mum always says, oh, how's your day been? And I'm like, no good today. And she's like, oh, what's up? And I'm like, work experience is coming up again. Obviously my second one, and they basically said, because I offered them a work placement that I could possibly do, and work I'm doing at the community radio station, and they basically told me that health and safety regulations need to be kind of brought forward. And she's like, oh, is that right? Oh, we'll just be getting a meeting sorted out then. So she phoned up the school, and she's like, right, I want a meeting sorted. And so yeah, there was a meeting. I'm literally trying to fast forward for all this because it's quite a long story, but I'm trying to cut it down. But I'm not fast forward to the meeting, and basically, started chatting amongst ourselves, and then it kind of got down to the nitty gritty. Like the list came out again, the dreaded list of like work experience stuff, and they were like, oh, well, what about this, Matt? Oh, what about that, or what about this? And by this rate, my mum was getting irritated. She was just like, you know what, give me it. And she literally took the list, and she's like, and she actually ran through everything with me. She's like, do you want to do this? And I was like, no. Do you want to do this? No. Do you want to do this? No. And she was like, do you see now? They don't want to do any of these. We need to come up with an alternative solution. And they just looked at us, and there was just silence in the room. So it just got to the point where my mum got up out of her seat, and we both left the meeting room with them still in it. She's like, right, we'll do it ourselves then.
Yeah.
Come on, Matty, we're leaving. And we both left. And I was just like, oh my god, like, my mum's like a total bata.
Oh, she is.
So yeah, basically like a day or two later, she actually got a meeting set up with the radio station that I wanted to do my work placement at. And they were more than happy. It's a woman that works there, and I think she probably still works there. But she was like, oh, we'd love to have them. We'd really love to have them. But she was like, well, there's one thing that you have to get over, and that's health and safety regulations. That's what they've been saying to us. So can you get in touch with them? And I think Mum wrote down like the school's number, and she's like, here, get in touch with them or something like that. I think that's what happened. And then I fast forward a day or two later, I got confirmation that I was able to do that work placement.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
And that was all down to my mum.
Yes.
My mum like literally came through for me that day. And I was just like, oh my god, I don't deserve you. I literally don't deserve you. Like literally. And I'm getting really emotional when I talk about it, because it's like mum's practically been my advocate for most of my life. I mean, obviously I'm able to self-advocate now. But there's nothing wrong with other people advocating for you. That's not what I'm trying to say. Like, if you've got someone advocating for you, that's great. But also, self-advocacy is good too. I think all types of advocacy are good. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was just...
But for a child who needs that person standing behind them and saying, this needs to be done, and it can happen, and it should, and being that the person who's standing up and saying this needs to happen when your voice is being ignored, which is what I'm getting from what you're saying.
And how many people didn't have that? Right? That's the fact that you needed that is really...
But I will say this, I will end this debacle on a positive note. On a positive note, the next year, I think it was my last work experience. and I was in 5th year, and they actually managed to get me a work placement at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall.
That's brilliant.
And that was without any, they came up to me like, oh, we've got a work experience position for you at the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. But mind you, I think, you know, that, yeah, again, that was down to my mum. I think they really, she kind of drummed it into them, really.
Yeah.
She kind of like taught them a lesson, like, right, there needs to be more. And they learned, you know what I mean? I will give them that. I mean, I'm not going to completely shame my school. But, like, no, but I'm not like, they did learn. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But that, yeah, again, most of the credit goes to my mum, really. And I will say that on record. You know,
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks, mum. And sort of financial barriers, well, I started filmmaking in 2013. Had no film training or no sort of no film school training, no art school training. I'm completely DIY and self-taught, so I basically went down to Toys R Us one day and I got like a little tiny kids camcorder for like 21 quid. And it was like hot pink, like a little tiny hot pink kids camcorder. And I made my first 2 films, What Is Femme Anyway and Just Me. And this was in late 2013. I was 22, so a couple of years ago, about 6-7 years ago. I can't remember, but and my twin brother, he did the sort of camera work. So that was kind of the beginnings of that. I've been given a platform by film festivals such as Scottish Queer International Film Festival, Whatever Film Festival. They're like a queer film festival in London. Ka-ching, ka-chang, ka-chunga. Big shout out. And Oscar Bright, obviously, and Heart and Soul, who are like a learning disability arts organisation based in London. They've kind of given me a platform. And Project Ability as well, you know. So just to name a few. And also, like a couple of years ago, I actually got a camcorder, like a proper camcorder. I wasn't even expecting it. I think it was my birthday, and my mum, my big brother, and my twin brother all clubbed money together to get me it. And I was nearly in tears. I was just like, because it was a genuine, because I had been talking about it to them. I'm like, oh, I need to get a new camcorder soon, but money and all that stuff, you know, like a proper high state of the art, well, not state of the art, but a high end camcorder. And it was like a Sony camcorder they got me. All of them chipped in money, and I was just like, honestly, what he's like. But yeah, it was really, really good. So that, I suppose, yeah, that's part of the sort of financial barriers that I had, was trying to get state of the art equipment, because obviously, you know, coming out of college with like £100 of your student loan left, you know, I was kind of like, yeah, what am I going to do here? So yeah, the 21 quid camcorder was kind of the beginning of that, but they kind of made sure that, right, we'll get you a reasonable camcorder at some point. And this is my last point. But like a pure talking, but no, but I think this is a really important one. I think personally for me, being down in Brighton and seeing all the work that Oscar Bright has done, and the fact that they've got a learning disability filmmaking community, it really makes me feel like when I come home, like there's nothing really here. And I'm just kind of like, well, it's because all the opportunities that I've been mostly getting have been down in England. And that's great, that's fabulous, I'm not knocking that at all, but I don't live in England. Don't live there, you know what I mean? So I've written down here, like, I feel like there's a need for more learning disability sort of filmmaking initiatives here in Scotland, because I don't feel that there's enough here, and I can't stress it enough, because as I said, I'm literally having to come back home and there's nothing here, there's not a hub, for learning disabled, not just filmmakers, but I suppose artists as well, just to kind of come together and maybe learn how to set up a camcorder, do some like film training, you know, just basic stuff, and you know, learn how to make animation, or just learn how to shoot a scene or a sequence, you know. And I think that would be really, really great. And me and my mum have been talking about this, because my mum's getting quite frustrated about it. She's like, well, you live here, there should be really something here for you. I mean, as I said, Oscar Bright, and I won't have a bad word said against them, they've done brilliant by me, and they've represented me brilliantly, and they've given me a platform, but there needs to be something here, and it's just not good enough. It really isn't, and I'm you know what I mean, sorry it sounds so disappointed, but like, it's just like, no, there needs to be a learning disability sort of filmmaking initiative here in Scotland,
and
for
so
people.
that there's a community here.
Yeah.
So that when you've been, when I hear you talking about your way down and going to Oscar Bright.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that when you've been in that kind of space, when you're in that kind of community, when you leave it, it can have a really strong sort of effect on you. I mean,
Definitely. It's like it's a come down.
Yeah. And having a community here would stop some of that happening, and maybe make it less of a huge change when you go down south,
Definitely.
and then have something to come home to, essentially.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a lot of stuff.
No, it's brilliant. I mean, you covered what barriers. Yeah, so like some film festivals. I mean, you've been involved with a good collection that you talked about, but like also most film festivals. I don't know if people know this, but they charge to submit your film, and those include short film festivals, like the ones that happen in Scotland. Most of them, not all of them. And that can be a huge barrier for someone like yourself. If you make a film and then you've got to put out between, it's like £25 to £50 roughly, to every festival internationally. Like, who has that kind of cash?
Yeah, I mean, if you're on GSA, then that is what, a quarter to a third of your weekly income.
And so that immediately, you've got limited screening capabilities, and then of course there's also the fact that people don't necessarily screen queer, learning disabled films, as you've mentioned. So, breaking through those barriers is difficult. And I think you've hit on something really interesting talking about Scotland, because I hear this again and again from different people from different kinds of marginalised communities. Like a lot of friends I have in the deaf community are all moving to England because there's no work here. Just and why this is still happening in Scotland. It's still.
And I finally meet another queer person of colour, and they're here for 4 years while they go to university, and then they go away again. It's like, or someone who's queer person of colour, and they're going to London because that's where all the brown queers go.
It's difficult.
I've actually got an analogous story about the. With the work experience thing, I had a fairly similar experience with applying for radio course. Back in 1994, and at that time I was finishing off my my technical theatre course, which was a national certificate, and I did a really good job at it. So I thought I'd apply for the course television radio, and they got an interview for it. But at one point they made me record an audio tape of me speaking into it to see how much I stammered. And then after that, I recorded that tape in a room on my own, and they came back after about 15-20 minutes. They must have had, I don't know, a coffee and a fag or something. And they came back, they gave them their tape, and they told me that I couldn't get on that course because of my stammer. And a few years after that, and I worked in theatre and film behind the scenes, and community shows and festivals and stuff, and applied to a different college and got no bother at all.
Brilliant.
But I also applied to that other college, would end up moving me back in the first place. And they still said that I would not get on the course because that's hour. But I told them then that I already got on the other course and I was just doing this and just trying to be basically to tell them, haha, I'm on a course anyway. And it was one of the same guys that interviewed me that the first time.
Wow.
So I'm really put him right in his place.
That's brilliant. And I think it's interesting how you're talking about how people kind of like shut doors on you before you've even started. And I think with learning disabled people and working class people in general, there's this idea of streaming that happens quite young a lot of the time. Like you're saying, they offer you a career, they're like, oh, you can go be a mechanic or this and not there's any problems with any of these things, but it's the stereotyping of like, this is what you should be doing.
But it's also the age as well. Most funding streams are like 18 to 25 and that's the cut-off.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, that's nah.
Yeah, so you've got educational streams which are crap, and then you've got funding streams which are also crap. Because they expect everyone to be starting out when they're young.
And
Like
ones that are crap as well.
Yeah. And that sort of that streaming and those being pushed into particular career paths says more about them than it does about the person they're trying to shove around. And that it shouldn't be like that.
No, definitely.
No, definitely. It's just as well I've got a gobby mum.
It is, it's very good. She's most excellent.
Including myself.
Something I struggle with and that I've seen a lot of people talk about is like this pressure to seem as artists productive and successful online. And the reality is, as you were saying earlier, some of us have like £10 or £5 in the bank and no work. Maybe we don't want to or can't work in ways that we're expected to, and we've been lying in bed for 3 days, but there's this pressure to appear kind of like attractive to prospective employers or I guess what I'd call like a largely middle class arts community. It's kind of the reality of it in the UK and in Scotland. And I feel this is kind of replicated even in disabled and queer communities a lot of the time. As disabled people under austerity, we're supposed to look like we're working all the time, but then we're also supposed to look like we can't do things. And it's an impossible situation to be in if you don't have privilege. And I think BIPOC, for listeners and readers, it's Black, Indigenous and or people of colour, disabled people who aren't from posh or middle class experiences are specifically targeted in a white supremacist culture that's based on all of the isms, like ableism, cis heterosexism, classism. And I thought maybe, Shafiq, you might want to talk about Edinburgh specifically, although you do move between Edinburgh and Glasgow, so feel free to expand. But how you feel about how mainstream arts are structured in Edinburgh and in Scotland, and how that impacts on BIPOC, working class, queer and trans people?
In Edinburgh, I've a friend who's looking to get funding for work at the moment, and the choices in Edinburgh are: are you doing something for the festival? Are you doing something for the art school or the art college? Or are you going to do something with very little support and backing and on a shoestring for some of the groups of people who live there all year round and are not going to put something together for, half the expletive deleted from London to come and see in 1 month of the year. That all the money, all the attention, all the funding, also exposure gets squidged into a very narrow space of time when the people who live in Edinburgh and are doing things all the time get forgotten about. It's almost it's almost a two or multi-tier system
It's
where
a perverse dichotomy.
where you have the proper artists, if you can, who have a pile of money from mummy or daddy, or have access to resources that other people don't have, who were able to raise £1,000 to put on a show at the Fringe, as opposed to someone who is like, well, that is a sixth of my annual income. That's not something that the number of dreams that never get past the space between someone's ears because there's not much point thinking about it. There's no way I can afford it. When it comes to BIPOC activities and representation spaces, there is, let me see, I have one, maybe two queer POC meetups in Edinburgh per year. That's it. There are a couple of people who I know as personal friends, who I see on occasion, but that is relatively recent. There is a group now called Vogue Scotland, which
I've heard of them.
I dance and not up to standard. I walked at my first ball in October. But I wasn't up to standard. The judges chopped me. But they came. It's one of those things that in Vogue and ballroom culture is, actually you probably get this as well, that you get feedback. And even when it hurts to be told that you didn't make the grade, you get really useful feedback on what you need to work on, where you went wrong, where you can go next. And Dancing with Vogue Scotland has more than doubled the number of queer POC I know in Scotland, which 5-10 years ago, the nearest LGBT POC I knew of were in London. Some of those things were going on, but the communication of that, the outreach aspect, finally reached me. And it's like, yes, I can go and be viciously, violently queer with other people and not be the brown person in the room, which, I'm sure other people will understand that being that person who is representing so much of being the diverse person in the corner.
There is. There's a lot of pressure there.
It's
so
exhausting.
much pressure because it's like, oh well, you're the token this or you're the token that. So there is that added pressure because it's like, well, it's not like. It's hard because you want to say, well, I never asked for it, but then you're kind of automatically put in that position.
On the spot.
And you're the monolith, right? Because it's like you represent everybody from everybody. And what you say is the final word, so don't mess it up.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, totally. But, I mean, it's something in Scotland, something in Edinburgh particularly, there are fewer per head of population people of colour, and it's something that I often come back to is that I think I mentioned earlier that a lot of the POC in Edinburgh are students, and they may or may not decide to settle here, but it's an extra barrier to creating community that you can connect with someone and share experience, but not know if they're still going to be around in 10 years' time. And that when I live in Scotland, I live in Edinburgh, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. And that that feeling that some people will come and go and I'm still going to be here. And though that also comes back to what Matty was saying about DIY, that if there's going to be a community, because I'm the one who's going to be here, I'm going to have to be the one who, well, don't have to, but if I make something, it will still be here. If someone else does it, it's something that they may take with them when they leave. And as so many people of colour in Scotland do, that we go away somewhere and go, actually, I'm going to stay here, I've noticed when visiting, sort of Manchester, Birmingham, Leicester. Visiting Leicester was probably my first experience of being in a place with a lot of British Asian people, and it was a really transformative experience in some ways, because I got off the bus and I realised thinking about it later, that there's something that I do, and there's a look. When you see another person of colour, a black person, an Asian person, you make eye contact. There's that moment of connection. You get off the train in Leicester, you're doing that to everyone on the street, and they think you're weird. Why is this guy looking at everyone? Are they, I didn't realise I'd been having this behaviour, and it was actually, it took me years and several visits to London to realise, that I now realise why that sort of getting off the trip and going to Bicon was so strange, because I was moving through an environment that I'd never experienced, where the white people or white passing people were in the minority.
Kate has just psychically connected with me on the fact that we are getting close to the end of our time, and she suggested that this question maybe could go out to everybody as we wrap up. What kind of art world would we like to have in Scotland and the world instead of what we have? Like, what are some dreams that we'd like to see come true here? I mean, I think from what you've all said, we can kind of guess a few of them, like, people staying.
And more access for people who don't have resources. More groups and communities coming together and making spaces.
That's a big one. Even if it's just more communities start off doing, say, local pantos, things which are just, for the community, could be anything. And more of those things start happening here in Scotland, it would make a huge difference. Doesn't matter what thing is, whether it's a writing group or singing groups. There's got to be more of those things, and then that will hopefully filter up to folk thinking, we could apply some funding streams there, maybe, and then think, there's also there who've got quite a lot of talent doing X, Y, or Z, so we could employ them doing together, and maybe possibly create an actual industry.
That'd be brilliant. I'd love to see a space, like an actual community centre for...
a community art space that isn't dependent on when the building or space gets sold off to developers, because that is something that you see. I've seen in Edinburgh. I'm sure it happens in Glasgow as well, where some group or community space lose access to the place that they were working out of, try and find a place to set up, and they're offered, usually by the local authority, a place that is probably old office space that is about
forest.
Well, it's happening now with St Margaret's House as well, which is where all of the and what happens is this, it's once you've seen it happen several times, you go, yeah, they get offered a space on the understanding that at some point the land will be going out to development, and they spend time and money and energy, and people put their hearts and souls into the space, and then it starts coming around to developers and big piles of money, and what's the word for it? Planning applications going out and going, yes, we're going to build another 5,000 student flats that will be little pasteboard boxes for lots of piles of money, and then having, not just the artists but the communities that they're embedded in standing up and going, no, we don't want to lose this space. This brings value to us. And then, the community then comes together to fight to save the space. But money talks, and eventually that space disappears and you have to find another place for everything to move to.
And with gentrification, that's becoming harder and harder, especially with Airbnb in Edinburgh. Oh my God.
Yeah, with the money talks part, that also applies to us. The shitty end of this spectrum too, because we've got bills to pay, farms to keep.
And as we don't have the resources to go, we'll just raise the money ourselves, because you don't have.
And you get the folk going, you do this big project, and they're like, and how much am I getting paid? Well, you're not getting. But this is that. Bizarre situation where you have to talk yourself or them into hiring you or not hiring you, depending on. You're on, because at some point they say, you get exposure and like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think councils and arts councils need to be putting money into spaces, like smaller spaces. It's interesting to see how the arts have changed in the past even 20 years. Like, things are focused in a way that have gone away from people having their own spaces, and everything's about touring or really, really big spaces getting lots of funding and supposedly representing everyone, which we know doesn't happen. So
trickle-down economics doesn't work with representation just the way it doesn't work with money.
That's true.
Did
you want to add to that?
I just think it's a total geographical shift. As I said, most of the stuff just seems to be happening down in England. And it's just a total no, we need to do more stuff here. As we've all said, really, it's just not good enough. It really isn't, and it's the sort of financial sort of hierarchies that are sort of happening. It's like, we the sort of self-taught DIY sort of artists, because we're marginalised, we are like right at the bottom, because we're at a sort of I suppose at an independent level, because we haven't, some of us might not have had or all of us haven't had the sort of formal education, or we just haven't had that, so we're having to literally just get off our backsides and do it ourselves.
Yeah, and Creative Scotland spends so much money sending Scottish projects elsewhere, which I think has its own importance or whatever, but it's a sort of way of branding what's best about Scotland, whatever. But they're not putting enough money into what's happening, in these communities and here in Scotland, and sustaining that.
I just started making films not 2 years after Trainspotting came out. There was a big Trainspotting effect, that's what it was called at the time. The Trainspotting effect, and there was a surge in Scottish filmmaking, especially the low end. community. I really based filmmaking that, and that was part of that, and it was fantastic. But I think I always kind of knew it was not going to last.
Well, you've all been absolutely brilliant, and I could talk to you all afternoon for hours more, but we have to wrap it up.
Yeah, we've only got so much battery power.
But we can go off and continue our conversations somewhere else. Thank you to everyone who's listening or reading this podcast. This has been Disability and ... working class LGBTQIA+, and some other things, including in Scotland. I'm San Allen, guest editor at Disability Arts Online from 30th of March to 26th of April, and you've been listening to or reading the words of the fab Shafiq Ghafoor, Maddie Kennedy, and Kate Lauder. I can't thank you enough for being here today. It's been awesome.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Visit greyeye.org and disabilityarts.online for details of productions, events, interviews, opinions, reviews, and learning opportunities.